Okay, so I think we might be ready to get started. So our AMI host has put all of our guests on mute. I would like if you guys could stay on mute until the end, and we will have a section of time for questions. So if you have any questions, write them down and save those until later. Let's see. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to respond to the chat box during. I think Grayson, who's on the Allegheny Mountain Institute page, will be monitoring the chat box. Someone is asking to share a link, and yes, absolutely. Share the link. All right, so there's about 25 of us on this call right now, and I think we're ready to get started. So my name is England Avis. I am the school garden coordinator at Bessie Elementary in Stanton, Virginia. I am in the AMI Farm Fellowship Program, so I'm currently in phase 2. And some of you are local in Augusta County. You might recognize me. I work at the local food drive-thru at Newtown Baking as well. So today we're going to be talking about seed saving, which is a really hot topic this year. When the pandemic really hit, there were a lot of gardeners who were unprepared, and seed companies had a lot of shortages. And then, of course, we all experienced grocery stores running out of dry goods like beans and rice and things. So I think seed saving is a really hot topic this year, as well as gardening. It's really increased interest all over the world. So let's get into saving, I guess. I first learned about it last year on the mountain during phase 1 of the fellowship from Ira Wallace. She is an author, and she's part of the Southern Exposure Seed Exchange community. She's been with them for quite some time, and she came up to teach our seed saving workshop, which was really expanded my mind quite a bit. I was sort of new to gardening and didn't really know much about seeds. And then having that hands-on experience, I realized how easy it is and how much we all can benefit from seed saving. So I'm excited to share that with everyone. Let me share my screen. And bear with me, I'm using 2 computers this morning. Give me 1 second. All right, so seed saving. Whether you're a hobby gardener or a market farmer, seed saving is an important practice that empowers all of us to connect with nature and take control of our food. Seeds are incredible, tiny little packages that hold life. And I'm sure if you're in this class, you agree that seeds are quite magical. It's really a great experience to watch a plant growing from seed to harvest when you can actually reap the benefits of the fruit and enjoy. But watching it go a step further and the plant produces seed that you can harvest is really something special too. I'm sure you all are aware of how great seeds are, so let's learn about why we save them. So, well, why do we save them? At the most basic level, growing food to sustain ourselves is a fundamentally human task. We seed, we grow, we harvest, we preserve, and we prepare those plants as food that sustain us as a species, as humans. So one of the most important reasons to save seeds is to preserve genetic diversity. According to Seeds of Diversity, 75% of biodiversity has vanished in the last 100 years. Genetic diversity is really crucial for adapting to lots of changes, especially as we watch the climate change. We need diversity for crop productivity, nutritional needs, resistance to pests and diseases, as well as for drought tolerance. Desirable traits are found by plant breeders by mixing and matching genetic diversity from seeds of modern cultivars, ancient heirlooms, and even the wild relatives of food crops. Therefore, we really do rely on this diversity to have regionally adapted seed gene pools for our food security. As the climate changes, the need for plant diversity increases. We really need these plant varieties that are more heat tolerant, more drought tolerant, and maybe resistant to pests and diseases. Saving seeds can help ensure that your plant varieties are best adapted to your specific region. Saving seeds on a small or large scale can definitely help preserve genetic diversity. Another reason for saving seeds is to save money, which I'm sure we are all very well aware of. A single seed packet in the store really isn't too expensive, but it definitely adds up if you're purchasing multiple packets to seed your whole garden or especially adds up if you're a market farmer. Seeds are one of the most important aspects to include in a budget when planning for your garden for the upcoming season. So if you can save some money to save seeds, why not? Plants often produce an abundant amount of seeds, much more than what typically comes in the seed packets. So saving the seeds you need can also be viewed as a statement against the corporate control of food, and it's a step towards self-sufficiency. Harvesting our own seeds to grow again means that what we eat is not determined by what we can afford at the grocery store. Another reason we want to save seeds is to build community and share culture. Heirloom varieties are a great example of this. They preserve genetic diversity as well as being a means of cultural preservation. Heirloom seeds are saved year after year and passed down through generations. These names that accompany heirloom seeds often have stories of origin, and these stories we know are a great way to share culture and build community. Sharing seeds from your garden or farm with local friends or family gives them an advantage in the growing season since those seeds are regionally adapted. Engaging in community gardens or inviting friends and family to help out in your garden, or maybe even to help process seeds, can be a great way to connect with people, connect with nature, and connect with your community. Sharing seeds with your neighbors helps increase access to healthy foods, and over time can often help build a resilient community. You should consider attending or hosting a seed swap if you haven't been to one already. There are plenty within local communities. I know here in Augusta and Highland County, there are seed libraries within the library buildings, but you can also check local organizations to see if they might already have a seed event on their calendar. Another reason we want to save seeds is for flavor. Of course, you want to save the seeds in your garden that you really enjoyed. Say you have a really great Cherokee purple tomato. Of course, you want to grow that the next year, so you would definitely save those seeds. Heirlooms are also often really unique flavors, so that's why those seeds have been saved and passed down through generations. Saving seeds is also good for pollinators. By saving seeds, we allow the plants to flower all season, and those pollinators have a chance to come visit those plants for nectar in an extended season that maybe they wouldn't have had those flowers otherwise. So now that we have ideas on why it's important to save seeds, we should dig deeper. There are basic steps you can take to save seeds for both dry processing and wet processing, but before we get into that, there are some important things we should go over. First, let's start with pollination types. You definitely want to get familiar with the pollination types of your plants, and please don't let this overwhelm you. This slideshow is created so you guys will have resources to go back and kind of read step by step, but I'm going to walk you through all of it today. So if you're new to seed saving, you probably want to start with self-pollinated plants. These produce true seed. Examples would be lettuce, beans, peas, tomatoes, and eggplants. Another pollination type to save seeds from would be open pollinated. Open pollinated are seeds that are naturally pollinated by wind or insects, and they will breed true when the plant is pollinated by another plant of the same variety. So there is a chance that open pollinated plants could cross with other varieties of the same species, and if that happens, the seed is not true. You definitely want to save seeds from self-pollinated and open pollinated type plants, which includes heirloom varieties. There's one type of seed you don't want to save, which is hybrid varieties. And you can see in the bottom picture here, it shows the result of cross-pollination between two varieties of the same genus and species. And the hybrid comes out quite different than the parent plants. So the first year when you plant a hybrid variety, it will come out with desired characteristics. But if you save seeds from those and plant them the next year, those fruits will not be the same as the parent plant. So you do not want to save hybrid seeds. They are typically sold by bigger companies like Johnny's Selected Seeds, and on the seed packets when you're purchasing in the store, you can kind of look and see if they have some note like F1, that means it is a hybrid seed. So there are open pollinated and self-pollinated seeds, and we also need to be mindful of cross-pollination and maintaining purity. So since open pollination occurs naturally with wind or insects, cross-pollination is something that could hinder the seeds that you're saving. Cross-pollination occurs when pollen is transferred from one plant to a different plant of the same species. It won't change the fruit this growing season, But like I said, if you save those seeds for the next year, that fruit will be changed, not the same as the parent plant. For example, squash blossoms, we all know bees love squash blossoms. So they can easily transfer pollen from, say, a cocozelle zucchini variety to maybe a crookneck squash variety. So if you save seeds from that crookneck squash, they will not produce the same fruit the following year. So how can we avoid cross-pollination to maintain the purity? There are a few ways. One, you can plant just one variety of the species. That I know that's really hard to do. I didn't do that in my garden this year. I had plenty of different kinds of tomatoes, all different varieties, because we like that fun and we like to have choices in what we're eating. So that is a bit hard to narrow it down to just planting one species. But if you must have multiple varieties and still want to save seeds, there are accurate distances for planting different varieties that can help you maintain purity. If you need to research that, I would look into, it's called separation distance or isolation planting. So those typically require a lot of space between different varieties of planting. And I know most of us don't have just acres and acres of land to plant different species on. So there are a few other methods that we can use, which are recommended by Seed Savers Exchange. And those are the two pictures on this slide. So on the top are blossom bags. These bags can be placed over blossoms of plants, kind of like tomatoes, eggplant, and peppers. The picture on the bottom shows an isolation tent, which is used more on a somewhat of a larger scale. The isolation tents or mosquito netting can be a bit challenging. Sometimes they require that you introduce pollinator species within that tent, or sometimes it requires that you alternate the placement of those bags. So that one is definitely something you'd have to research a bit more in if you plan on doing the isolation netting. There are some long-term or maybe permaculture-based approaches that you could take. This would be planting landscape barriers. So if you don't have a building in the exact place you want it, you could plant a hedgerow or a tree line. But you could also plant, like pollinator distracting plants as a way to hinder pollen being transferred and kind of change how the pollen moves through your landscape. Another thing to keep in mind about seed saving is saving for desirable traits. This may be intuitive to some. Like I said earlier, you have that Cherokee purple tomato in your garden that you really love and you want to grow it for years to come. So of course you want to save that plant, but there are some other things to consider. It refers mostly to how the plant did in your garden that year. Did it hold up well through storms or maybe a drought? Did the plant itself germinate well when you started from seed? Did it produce an abundance of fruit? How did it do with your specific soil conditions? These are definitely things you want to consider when saving seeds. You should also be mindful of diseased plants and avoid saving those seeds. There are many viruses or bacterial and fungal diseases that can be present on seeds and transfer to future crops. So I like to think of saving seeds as natural selection, and you of course want to choose the best plants to save seeds from for the following year. This top picture here actually does show a Cherokee purple tomato. It's a really popular heirloom variety. And the bottom photo shows a tomato that has blight, which is a diseased plant, and you definitely don't want to save seeds from that because it could transfer to your crop next year. Next, we'll talk about market maturity and seed maturity. So oftentimes when we harvest a plant to eat, the seeds are likely not fully mature. This is really common in veggie plants. We eat cucumber, greens, eggplant, peas, and beans much longer before their seeds are mature enough for harvest. So when planting your garden, you definitely want to take time into consideration. The plants that you're saving for seed will have to grow much longer and stay in your garden and take up that space in order for them to get all the way to seed and dry on the plant for you to harvest. For instance, bean and pea pods, we would eat those fresh, green, right off the plant, but in order to save dry seeds, those actually die back on the plant and turn brown, and that's when the seed is ready to harvest. So this is true for most pods like brassicas in the picture to the right. I think this is a mustard green of some sort, but you can see in the top right, there are the seed pods, which have turned brown and one is cracked open and the seeds are falling out. So that plant looks a lot different when it's ready to harvest for eating versus when it's ready to harvest for seeds. There are some other examples that should dry right on the plant itself, like corn. If you're saving corn seed, that will dry right on the stalk. So definitely has to be in the garden quite a bit longer. There are some exceptions like fleshy fruit, such as cucumbers and eggplants. So those will continue growing on the plant about 2 weeks or so after the edible stage. They'll become overripe and start to rot, and that's when you would harvest and move on to wet seed processing. Okay, so there are a couple methods of seed processing. Now that we have some other information on why it's important to save seeds and things to know, let's go into the process of saving dry seeds. This is pretty straightforward and it's a really great method for beginners. You would start by harvesting seeds from the plant when they're fully dry. You would gather these seed heads or pods and pick a method of threshing that fits your scale. So the bottom picture here on the screen shows a woman threshing in a pillowcase, which is a really good method. Threshing means when seed heads are flailed, beaten, smashed, or rubbed until the seeds fall free from the pod or the seed head. You can separate by hand, like in the above picture with bean pods. That would be on a much smaller scale. If you have a large amount, you may want to put them in a pillowcase like the woman below, or you can even maybe use a bucket or a Rubbermaid container to beat the seed pods around and the seeds will fall down and you'll be left with the chaff. After threshing, you will need to winnow the materials. So winnowing is a way to separate the seeds from the chaff and debris. Winnowing can be done many ways. You can use screens. I had shown that, I think, that will come up in the next slide. So you can use screens to separate, you can use fans, you can rely on gentle wind, or you can really get creative and use a hair dryer at home that has the heat setting turned off. Make sure you would do this outside with a large sheet or a tarp underneath, so if any seeds blow away in the process, you can get those at the end and save those too. So this picture in the bottom with a woman threshing in a pillowcase is really great example because she's doing it over a large surface where if any seeds were to come out, she's able to get those at the end and save those too. So these pictures give you a better idea of threshing your seeds and winnowing. I really like this diagram on the left here. It's a really good drawing of kind of just the idea. So you have your seeds up here and you want to have a container, a big enough container for sure below, and you would pour gently and there's a source of wind coming from this side. So if you're using a fan like the man in the middle, or in the top right picture, this could just be small bowls holding off your back deck and maybe somebody blowing or using a hair dryer on one side. So the idea is that the heavy viable seeds fall down into the catchment basin and the small seeds which are not viable and the chaff blow off to the side, so you're left with just the seeds you need. This bottom picture on the right shows screens, which also is a winnowing process. These can actually be purchased, but they're also pretty easy to make at home too. So wet processing for seed saving is a bit more in depth. It's still quite easy, and I would recommend it for beginners who want to experiment with seed saving. So these are seeds from fleshy fruits, which need to be separated from the pulp, then washed or dried. For some wet seeds, it's as simple as scraping seeds out, soaking them gently. I wrote 6 to 8 hours, but you could really even soak them for 2 to 8 hours and then rinse thoroughly and dry them. Some wet seeds, like tomato and cucumber, definitely require fermentation to clean the seeds and remove the germination inhibiting gel. Fermenting can also kill molds, mildew, and other diseases. So on the next slide, we'll go over fermentation of seeds, but I did want to hit on the germination inhibiting gel. So if you can kind of picture the inside of a tomato, I know we commonly just eat the seeds, but you can really picture there's kind of a gel around it, and that is actually a plant adaptation that stops the seeds from sprouting while they're still in the tomato. So I thought that was really cool. But fermentation is the next step you would take to get that off of there in order to save the seeds. So I wanted this slide to be kind of step by step so you can go over it and refer to it later, but I'll go over it quickly with you now. And I like to picture this as tomato seeds because that's often what we're doing when we're fermenting seeds for saving. So to ferment seeds, you scoop them out and the pulp into a jar, and you would add a little bit of hot water, maybe just about an inch or two to cover the material in your jar. You'd set this jar somewhere visible so you can shake or stir it several times a day. This inhibits the growth of mold or kind of scum on the top. While you're stirring that jar, you want to wait 1 or 2 days until the seeds start sinking to the bottom and separate from the flesh. It's okay if you notice bubbling or scum. That is just part of the regular fermentation process. So after day 2 or 3, remove a few seeds to test them. You want to see if the coating has been separated. And you can do this by just like rinsing a couple seeds and feeling if they're still slimy, they definitely need to ferment another day or 2. If they're not so slimy, you're ready to move on to the next step. So you definitely do not want to over ferment. Keep checking every day or 2. They should be ready in under a week. Once your seeds are separated from the pulp, you want to decant. So you would do this by transferring the mixture into a larger jar and adding about 4 parts water to 1 part of seeds and pulp mixture. You would stir well until the viable seeds settle on the bottom and the pulp floats to the top. Gently pour off the pulp, add more water, and continue swirling around until the seeds continue to fall and the pulp and gunk come up to the top, and you can pour those off. You keep repeating the step until you have just the seeds. You can rinse those seeds thoroughly and strain. One tip, I would always pat the strainer with an extra cloth to kind of absorb that extra amount of water or liquid. And then drying is definitely the most important part. You want to dry these seeds by spreading in a single layer on a nonstick surface. Do not use a cloth or a paper towel because they will definitely stick to that. You can leave the seeds to dry in a cool, dry, shaded spot for 1 to 3 days or until completely dry. Sometimes they definitely take longer than that. Then another important step is to store properly. We'll go over that in a little bit. You will know that these seeds are completely dry and ready to store when you can clean snap them easily in half. So on this slide, I wanted to give you a visual image of what it looks like when you're fermenting seeds. So on the left side of the screen, you'll see tomatoes in kind of a yellow colored water that is during the fermentation process. And you can see kind of some of the gunk and scum has risen to the top, and there's a thick layer of seed and maybe some pulp still on the bottom. This image on the right shows, I think it's tomatillo seeds, that there's a thin layer of seeds on the bottom you can definitely see are separated from the pulp, and this person has added at least 4 times the amount of water, and they are pouring off the excess until it's just the seeds left at the bottom. Okay, so before we move on to proper seed storage techniques, there are a few outliers that we should discuss. Potatoes are a great example because you grow these from spud, not seed. When harvesting potatoes, you should save the small ones for seed stock. Just gently brush off the excess dirt. You do want to keep a nice layer of dirt on there. You don't want to wash it off, kind of just brush off any extra. And then you would just keep these stored in a cool, dry, dark area until they're ready to plant again next year. Sweet potatoes are very similar. They are a tuber. So you would keep smaller sweet potatoes for seed stock. And about a month or so before you want to plant them the next season, you bring the seed stock into light, which starts the sprouting of the slips is what they're called. So you keep the sweet potatoes in a light place, and as the slips grow to the size that you want them, you can snip them off the potato and you can plant them right into the ground. There's an extra step I like to take if I'm doing sweet potatoes. I'll snip them off the plant and root them in a glass of water for a week or 2, just to give them an advantage when we plant them into the ground. That way they are more acclimated and hopefully will grow more vigorously when they have roots. Another outlier is garlic. So each clove in the bulb will be saved and planted to produce a new bulb of garlic the following year. So if you're already growing garlic, just save a couple of the smaller bulbs for next year and separate those, the cloves from the full bulb, and plant those cloves individually. And over the season, they will grow into a full bulb. Garlic planting is usually done in October before the ground freezes. Okay, so time for proper seed storage. So you've done the hard work of growing, harvesting, cleaning, and processing the seeds. Let's make sure to store them properly so they are viable for years to come. To succeed, you definitely have to start with completely dry seeds. Sorry, my cat is being a little bit loud today. Once the seeds are totally dried, store them in an airtight container. So this would be something like mason jars, Tupperware, or something metal. Label your containers with the seed type and the date saved. It doesn't have to be the exact date, maybe just the month and the year. Do not skip this step or you will be kicking yourself later when you can't remember like you thought you could. I swear this is the most important step. Really label those. And that could be in the left picture, just a piece of paper you put in there with it, or something taped on the side or on the top of the jar with what the contents are and the date. So you can also, if you're really worried about moisture, you can include silica gel packets, but this likely is not going to be a problem if your seeds are dried completely. You want to store these labeled seeds in a dry, dark place with consistently cool temperatures. So I wanted to give you guys some common examples of seeds to save. These we'll go over in these next few slides, a few really common garden plants that we all are probably familiar with. I've realized that it's the best way to go about seed saving is just getting familiar with how the plant itself looks and grows, and really observing it throughout the whole growing season. So you are familiar with how it looks at all stages in life. In your garden, just pay close attention to your plants and it'll become easy to know when they're ready to harvest for seed. Dill and cilantro on this page are very common annual herb plants, and their seed saving process is quite similar to one another. For both of these herbs, you let the plant grow and you harvest and enjoy it, and once you would continue to let it grow and produce flower. Over time, maybe a couple weeks, these flowers will start to turn into seed heads or seed pods, and you will be able to notice those just looking closely at the plant while you're observing in your garden. They will be, you know, kind of hard, dried green spheres usually. After you notice that they are producing seed pods, you would wait and let them dry on the plant until they turn brown and are kind of crispy. So you can see in this second picture on the left, those are dried dill seeds on the plant still. And the far right picture is coriander or cilantro seeds, which are totally brown and dried on the plant. So once they are dried on the plant like that, I would just grab like a brown paper bag and stick that kind of under the plant and clip the seed heads off into the bag. I would store those seeds in a dry, warm place for 1 to 2 weeks, kind of let the rest of the moisture get out of there. And then you're ready to label those and store them properly. So next is annual flowers. I think I did include echinacea as a perennial flower, but you'll get the idea. So I really like this picture on the left of marigold because it shows the bud, shows a bloom, an immature flower. Well, I'm sorry, that's an immature seed head, and then a mature seed head. The bottom picture on the marigold is what the seeds look like when you pinch them out of the mature seed head. Annual flowers are really simple to save seeds from. You essentially just let the flower die in place. You kind of monitor it, and once it turns brown and crispy, you should go in there and find those seeds. So the echinacea flower on the right side is a bit similar. You just let it die back, and you can see the top photo. The seed heads are still kind of brown and a little bit of green, so those themselves are still quite full of moisture and living, while the petals started to die back. But the bottom photo of echinacea shows the really dried seed head, which is ready to collect seeds from. Okay, here are some other common garden flowers. Nasturtium on the left. The most important thing is really just letting the seed heads dry almost completely on the plant before you harvest the seeds. And once you fully harvest mature seeds, just clip them into a brown paper bag again and continue drying for a week or two. On the right, we have zinnia, which is just the same exact process for an annual flower. Another flower that's really common to save seeds from would be sunflower, but sometimes you really have to fight the birds to get those seeds before they do. That might be something, if you're growing a smaller variety of sunflower, you could use a blossom bag on or some type of bird netting to keep the seeds still on the plant and away from the birds. I do want to add a quick side note here, just something that I thought was really interesting. The green seed pods on nasturtium flowers are actually edible. You can harvest them before they're dried and crispy brown, and you can pickle them, and they are kind of a replacement for capers. Okay, so I want to show you a common vegetable to help familiarize you as well. Kale, greens, and lettuce all grow pretty similarly. At the end of the growing season, they will bolt, which means they grow quickly upward and they produce flowers. So in this top photo, you can really see all of that kale has started to bolt with the yellow mustard flowers. At this time, the greens taste pretty bitter and are unpleasant to eat, but at this point, you should be saving those plants to go to seed anyway. And another note is bees really, really love mustard flowers, so it's a way to extend their nectar throughout the season. So watch as your kale plants produce flowers, and over a few weeks, you'll see that they are turning into green seed pods. What you can see in this photo on the bottom with the hand, those are green seed pods. You would allow these pods to turn brown on the plant before collecting the seeds. And once you have a large bundle of seed pods, like the bottom right photo, then you're ready to thresh. So you can do the pillowcase method, smashing them on the ground. The pillowcase would also be easy. You can like swing it over your back, over your shoulders to hit your back. Or you can beat them around in kind of a large bucket, hitting the edges or of a Rubbermaid container. Then, of course, you will need to winnow those seeds to separate the viable seed from the chaff. And then you can label and store those properly. Last example that we will go over today is for peppers. I know that peppers are really easy and really fun to grow, and they produce so many seeds, so why not save those and save yourself some money and save the varieties that you really enjoy. So I included a link here from Seed Savers Exchange, but the peppers are pretty straightforward. These are a plant that you would allow the fruits to stay on the actual plant, continuing to grow past the edible stage, maybe about 2 weeks or so after you would harvest to eat them, continue letting them grow. And then once the fruits themselves start to soften and are visibly very ripe, that's when you would harvest them from the plant to save those seeds. One note, if you are working with hot peppers, you should definitely wear some type of gloves or protective eye gear to save yourself later. So essentially you would just cut around the stem of the pepper and twist the stem with seeds out, or you can cut in half, just really open the pepper up so you can see those seeds. You may want to rinse the seeds off, but if they're already mostly clean and dry, you can skip the rinsing for this. Allow the seeds to continue to dry on a flat nonstick surface for a few days, or maybe even up to a week or two until they are really fully dry. And again, you can test that by kind of snapping cleanly in half. Then you're ready to label, store, and plant in upcoming growing seasons. So now you know how to save seeds. Congratulations. You can partake in seed saving for many important reasons. Saving seeds is a great way to preserve genetic diversity, to save money, to take control of your food source, and to build community by sharing cultures. To save seeds, get familiar with pollination types and varieties of plants that you enjoy. Know how to select plants with highly desirable traits for seed saving. Remember to avoid those diseased plants. It's kind of natural selection. Be sure that you harvest the seed at seed maturity, not harvest maturity for eating. Get familiar with your plants at all stages of their life cycle, and have fun experimenting with both wet and dry processing techniques. You can really get creative with the threshing and winnowing aspect of this, and even with the fermenting too. It's a really fun project. Gardeners are innovative, and you can use many things around your house to help you in these processes. And of course, do not forget to label your seeds and store them properly for many productive growing seasons to come. So I put together some resources for more information for you all. This first slide here, there are a couple of really good books. I actually checked these out from the Augusta County Library. So they're in this local area here. And then these links on this slide are some of what I use to kind of help me put together this information guide for you all. And the next slide has reputable sources and local seed connections. So Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, they're a regionally adapted and heirloom seed company. They have a really great blog with really helpful guides. They also sell really awesome seeds. Seed Savers Exchange is another great resource bank. Virginia Cooperative Extension is really good for agriculture help, but all states have universities with extension offices that specialize in agriculture fields, so these provide really localized information. I did include a really helpful link here to guide you on how to find your local extension office. You can reach out to them for things as basic as a soil test, asking any questions about insects or pest management. They're really helpful in the agriculture realm. There's a couple other links here, and then I included some information on the Augusta County Seed Library for us in Augusta County, and in Highland County, AMI also put together a seed library, which is now online, and those are really great organizations. So I'm not sure where most of our viewers are from today, but you most likely also have a seed library somewhere in your community. I would reach out to your local library and see if they can help you figure out where to go to connect with others who have seeds to share. And of course, you can also reach out to me with any questions, or to Grayson, who is also on this call. So let me get back seeing our screen, and then we can move on to any questions. Okay. Grace, are you here with me? Okay, if anybody has any questions, they are welcome to unmute their microphone and ask away.
So we've had a basic question about, will we be sharing the PowerPoint? And yes, the answer is that this recorded presentation, as well as the PowerPoint slides, so you have that great set of resources, will be shared with everyone in an email in the coming days. Also have some great wisdom shared in the chat about the way to save asparagus seeds, which is very similar to some of your other dry processing.
Yeah, asparagus seeds are really cool. I'm sure most of you are familiar with how the plant looks itself, but it's kind of like a Christmas tree. And when they have the little red seed buds, they look like ornaments on the tree. I'm not really familiar with growing asparagus from seed. I've only heard about planting it with crowns. I would think planting from seed, it just takes a couple more years to establish before you can harvest a good crop from it. I'm trying to go through these comments now, see if there's any other questions that I missed. Seed bags, pollinate with little paintbrush bees can't get in. That's a good question. So I really like, well, if you have bees, bees really are attracted to squash blossoms. So you shouldn't have a problem with pollination then, but you can, if you're isolating or want to maintain a pure seed, you can definitely hand pollinate with either the pistil of the flower itself, or like this person said, you can use a paintbrush to take pollen from one flower and introduce that to another flower. Someone had asked if the Augusta County Exchange actually has seeds to share. I believe that they do. I'm not so sure how you can access it. I'm not sure if the Augusta County Library is open right now, but you can definitely reach out to them and ask about their seed library. I know that they have one there. Someone here has asked a question: if they grew 4 types of peppers close together, will those saved seeds remain pure or be random cross-pollinated? That's a really good question, and it's kind of hard to answer. Peppers are self-pollinated plants, which means the flower just pollinates itself in its blossom and then produces the pepper. Sometimes they are visited by insects who might carry pollen from one pepper over to the next one, which would mean that those seeds could be cross-pollinated and not produce the same fruit the next year. My suggestion is to experiment and save the seeds anyways and try growing them next year. Even if they're not the original of what you planted that first year, you might come out with some hybrid that you end up liking the following year. So you can definitely experiment. Oh, awesome. Someone is saving seeds in a large urban garden. They're asking, what's the likelihood of cross-pollination with 20 varieties of tomatoes and 10 types of squash? For this question, I would say the squash is much more highly likely to be cross-pollinated because the squash blossoms all look so similar, and bees and other insects are really attracted to those blossoms. I would be a bit wary about saving those seeds from squash, but again, experiment and have fun trying and seeing what it produces the next year. For those tomatoes, those are similar to peppers and they are self-pollinating flowers. So there is a small chance that they could be cross-pollinated, but usually since they're self-pollinated, they are true to seed. Somebody is asking, I grew fabulous peppers from a grocery store pepper. Is it worth it to save the seeds from peppers that grew? I would think yes. If you already grew them once, try saving the seeds to grow again. They might not be as vigorous since they were store-bought and you aren't able to track if there were pesticides or chemicals used. But if you did it once, save them and do it again. Okay, someone is asking, raise Amish paste tomatoes, which are so delicious. I grew those the first time this year. The same plants raised by seed by their son and shared to us. Ours had hard green on the top of the ripe tomato. His did not. His were red all the way to the top. Why? That's a really good question. I'm not sure I know the answer. It could be dependent on your specific region or even your soil conditions or the microclimate of your garden. I know that it's been a weird year in general and usual. There's a lot of variables really. Okay, so I think we are ready to get this recording together and our resources to send everyone in the class. And I'm so thankful that everybody joined us today and that you all will get these resources because sharing seeds is something really fun and also really important. So thanks for taking part in this today.
And I just want to reiterate, if you have any questions that pop up a little bit later on, you have England's email. You can always reach out to her or me, and we will do our best to get you an answer. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.